I think she's going to Lincoln University when they start again for English lessons. But
Fantastic.
at the minute, everything's online.
Now, you can't...
But today...
yeah, go on. Sorry, carry on. I'm just looking at the clock.
Like I say, today, she's received a laptop in the post from the DWP.
Fantastic.
So they're obviously helping her.
Yeah. What for?
Because it came out of the blue. I've no idea. English lessons, finding a job. I've no idea. It arrived in the post.
You sure it wasn't Amazon? You sure it's not next doors?
No, it's definitely DWP because they came.
Anyone in Market Raisin expecting a laptop? Go on. No, I'm joking. Well, that's good. And so again, it helps to integrate. Now, you don't have to answer this question, but are you in this indefinitely?
Yeah, I've told her. We had a chat.
Yep.
So she's from May. We've got obviously a year of the government paying her rent.
Right.
That's basically how I'm looking at it.
Okay.
And we've said that after Christmas we'll sit down and think about finding somewhere to live and a job, but there's no rush.
Okay, that's nice. Okay.
And I've got friends who have old furniture and stuff, and it's slowly being stored in a shed out of the way so that she actually has stuff as well.
Good man. And again, we'll return to this subject. I hope you're listening. Keep us posted. Find out. I mean, the next chapter of all of these stories, apart from the rather sad one from Burnley about the 18-year-old who's going back, albeit I completely understand why, is language. If you can learn more English more quickly, then everything gets better, everything gets easier. It's 11:45. It's 11:47. This whole scheme, writes Nick in South Wales, was designed to play out this way. The government couldn't organise and keep quiet illegal parties during a lockdown, so no one could expect them to set up an emergency response housing refugees. They knew that good British people would do their work for them and then allow them to do the bit where they claim support, or at least to do the bit that they do terribly, to offer no support, and when stuff goes wrong, they can say it's got nothing to do with us. I hope not. I don't think they were expecting the response that they got. I think that they've surrounded themselves with the sort of vampires who say things like, well, if you care so much about refugees, then you put one up in your home. And they didn't expect 1 million people to put their hand up and go, all right, then I will. Because they speak to the people who still love the idea of deporting completely innocent people to Rwanda against their will. That's the people that they exist to speak to. That's who Liz Truss is campaigning to impress. That's who Priti Patel falls asleep dreaming of. The people who love the idea of refugees being deported to Rwanda against their will. They don't really, I think, exercise much energy thinking about Ukrainians. And if they did, then they stopped, because there doesn't seem to be anything in place for what happens at the end of 6 months. Which is why I'm glad that you accepted my invitation to share broadly positive stories this hour, because I suspect in the great scheme of things, it has been a success. And the temptation to focus on the quarter of Britons who want to end the arrangement after 6 months is one that should be resisted, because that means 3/4 are going so well that people are quite happy to carry on. And the people that we've heard from who do want to end it have offered up perfectly reasonable, sympathetic solutions, which in the main may have been assuaged by a little bit more interest from government, by a little bit more support from central government, albeit that local government appears to have excelled itself. I just hope the Daily Mail never finds out, because they'll be running stories about how British people are being pushed out of the queue before you can say, UKIP. Jill's in Oxford. Jill, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. Jill. I'll just tell you our experience of the whole system. We applied at the very beginning and went onto a Facebook group. And initially, a family with 2 children, a dog and a cat, got in touch with us. And we said yes, but they then found that the bureaucracy of getting everything sorted out was too much and decided to stay in Hamburg, I think, where they were.
Okay.
And the next person who got in touch was a single woman. So we said yes. And we went through the forms together. It took a whole month for her visa to come. But she arrived. She's absolutely lovely. She fits in really well with us. She's really made the effort to learn English, because she didn't speak very much when she arrived. She's actually a graphic designer, and she's just got a fantastic job with a graphic design agency nearby, which she will be starting very soon. We would actually take another refugee, but we've just had our son and girlfriend move back in with us as well. So
it's a right old Full House. It's a sitcom waiting to happen in your life, Jill.
Fortunately, everybody gets on really well, so that's really good.
Oh, that's
glorious. But we
glorious.
did manage to find a sponsor for for her friend who wants to come as well, who has the 1-year-old daughter, and she's from Zaporizhzhia. And that was 2 months ago. And the baby's visa came through immediately. But the visa for the friend took 2 months to come through. It still isn't working particularly well, the visa system. But
no, I mean, if it's 75,000 people have come through it, then it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it? You can point at some successes, but it was obviously a bit of a mess.
Yes.
From the beginning, whether deliberately or not, and very little has been done to reverse engineer it or to fix it subsequently. So you're essentially an undiluted good story, an undiluted happy story.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
yes,
nice.
As I say, we would definitely happily house another person.
If it wasn't for your pesky son coming home. What
exactly.
What about the money side of things? Are you all right on that? The 350 helps and the
yes. Good. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understood that was for a year.
Yes, it is. No, it is. It is. I've double checked. It is for 12 months. But that's not to say that they won't extend it. Of course. Yes,
yeah, absolutely. But we've told we will keep this woman for as long as she wants to stay. So that's
You're
our
lovely,
situation.
Jill. You're lovely. No, you really are. And well, thank you. I like these stories. We needed to hear them today. And the more you hear them, the more you think, do you know what? Probably, if there are some difficulties on the horizon for some families and some refugees, then there'll be people like Jill and my other callers today who will be there to help. It would just be nice if their lives were made a bit easier by some sort of central organisation. But unfortunately, the responsibility for that lies with the people who are too busy at the moment trying to deport completely innocent people to Rwanda against their will. And I will keep saying that because it is absolutely relevant, pertinent and important. Christine's in Southampton. Christine, what can you tell us?
Hi, Christine.
I'm James. You're Christine. Easy mistake to make. Seriously, I must get a haircut, Christine. You've reminded me.
I've got another happy story for you, really,
Fantastic.
But I guess with a kind of a warning on the horizon.
Yes.
I sat there in the beginning, like so many of us, and just thought, I can't sit here with a spare room that I just dry washing in and do nothing. So I jumped in with both feet. Didn't really think about it, to be perfectly honest with you, but struck gold. We have a mum and her 12-year-old daughter who come to stay with us. My daughter's 11. They get on very well. They're both very different children. They do get on well. They go to the same school. Mum's got a job. She doesn't really enjoy it because it is beneath what she was doing in Ukraine, but she's busy and she's working. Her and I get on very well. She drinks wine. That's always a help.
Yes, it is. The international language of grapes.
And so it's working. I couldn't ask for a better match. If I had to kind of, describe the perfect refugee, they would be it.
Yes.
I guess, though, for me, I'm a single parent. So I'm, mum and dad.
Yeah.
But there's only one wage coming into the house. And I'm self-employed.
Right.
So when I start to receive the government money, it will help. They've been here 4 months.
Why haven't you received anything yet? Do you know?
Oh, do you know what? You have to have a fire safety check. Well, we only had that yesterday.
Okay.
Got to have a DBS, so I filled it in. They lost the DBS, so they did another one. It's just one thing. So I've given up asking for the moment because it's just too stressful.
Right.
So when it comes in, it will help. Now, yes, I signed up for a year, so I will go over the 6 months anyway. That's just that's not even a discussion that we've even had in the house. But come 12 months, and I don't know if it's going to be a discussion. It certainly will be if there isn't any financial help, because I'm really worried about bills and the winter and that. And at some point, I do want my house back.
I mean, that's perfectly normal, isn't it? I mean, we're all different. Some people love having people running around the house, and some people actually hate it, and most of us are probably somewhere in between the two. But, I mean, it sounds as if once the money comes through, it'll be backdated, so that'll help. Won't it? And that will help. It'll come at just the right time with the cost of living knocking at our door. And then, have you had a conversation with them about when They might. Well, you won't have even opened that conversation yet, but they must know that they're not going to live there for the rest of their lives.
No, well, we have kind of touched on it. I mean, when they arrived, they thought they were only staying till September because they thought the war would be over.
Oh, bless them.
So it's a bit of a shock. I mean, they're telling me stories about how the word on the ground at home is that women are going to be joining the war. Certain roles and jobs and things. Whether that's voluntarily or conscripted, I don't know. But so they're not going home anytime soon. Her husband's in Kyiv.
Right.
But it's just because it's been so shambolic sorting it out in the beginning, and there is no support. I mean, I'm doing this on my own with a great WhatsApp
You're amazing. Yeah.
What happens in 12 months-ish? Because
when the clock runs out, you want your life back.
Right.
Despite and I mean, I suppose the best case scenario, if nothing happens, if no help is forthcoming, if the Home Office don't get their finger out, the best case scenario is that you continue to host them with a growing sense of discomfort.
Yes, that's exactly. But there's no way I'll ask them to leave if they've got nowhere to go.
I sense that just listening. I sense that listening to you. But equally, there's no way that you can consider the new arrangements to be preferable to your normal life, the life that you and your child are leading together.
I mean, if kind of a flat was put on the table in front of them with their universal credit and what they earn, they would just about to be able to make ends meet. But there's no way they're going to be able to save the deposit and the month's rent in advance and all the other stuff that goes in front, up front.
And that is it.
Furnishing it.
There would still be gradients to climb, even with a bit of intervention or assistance from the authorities, but they wouldn't be as steep. Thank you. Keep saying thank you. I'm saying thank you on behalf of Ukraine. Even my ego's not that enormous, but I'll tell you why I'm saying thank you. You're making me proud to be British, which is, a bit rare these days, isn't it? Especially when you're looking up the ladder of politics. Indeed, Ian in Manchester puts it better than me. He says, James, you really do have some truly lovely listeners. It's very heartwarming. Don't get too carried away, Ian. I glance at my inbox. I've got some right old monsters listening as well. Last word on this to Paul, who's in Bangor. What have you got, Paul?
Hi there. Some of the points have been covered, but this whole thing about, it being down to money, and I know people's things have risen, but, the payment goes for 12 months. So if we think it's worrying that 25% are wanting to sort of drop out of the scheme
after
now.
6 months, yes.
After 12 months, when the £350 a month dries up, and of course there might be people not even aware of that because the communication of it so badly, the local authorities.
But it won't necessarily dry up, will it?
Well,
I'd be surprised. I mean, if the war is still going on and the refugees are still here, I mean, I wouldn't put anything past this shower, actually, anything at all.
So they don't need to keep paying.
No, but I mean, it would. I think it would blow up in their faces fairly quickly if they withdrew it, don't you? I mean, I wouldn't put anything past this lot, anything at all. But I think this would be a grossness too far, I think.
But the other thing is, if you've come here from Ukraine, I know a lot of people, they didn't expect the war to go on this long, and it's horrible that it has. But, if you are going to be here and then you have to go out on your own and find your own place to live.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know how hard that is at the moment.
Yeah, no,
trying to find a rental property.
Doesn't bear thinking about.
But there's been lots of people as well who have applied to have people come and stay with them, and then the application has taken so long that the Ukrainian people have had to come up with a plan B, and they then find themselves somewhere else in Europe sheltering, or sometimes have gone back home because things have stabilised. A lot of those people are still wanting and able to help out, but they've never actually managed to match themselves up with a refugee.
Sure.
So whenever one person has done their 6 or 12 months and said, look, I can't do any more, what are they doing to try and encourage?
Well, they're not doing anything, and they'll be leaving it to charities and individuals and Facebook pages and volunteers, but hopefully they'll step up to the plate again. But it kind of sums up this government's approach to the whole issue, is that they do as little as possible. If it goes well, claim the credit, and if it goes badly, wash their hands immediately, or just forget about it entirely. And I keep saying this because it makes my blood boil. I use the word being proud to be British or patriotism, but we're talking to members of the public, we're talking to voters, talking to people. The actual politicians, when it comes to the R word, when it comes to the issue of refugees, they have put infinitely more effort into trying to deport innocent people to Rwanda against their will than they have put into trying to make these Ukrainians here as welcome and as comfortable and, crucially, as secure in the long term, looking forward, as possible. And that, I'm afraid, is Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain. Right, funny one now. Well, it's not funny, but it may need a little bit of context. It's our last hour together. I always try and look for something funny. Well, not funny. Not ever. I'm not retiring early yet. It's our last hour together this week. I'm back at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. This is quite an odd job, as you know. It is not a job I ever expected to have, although it is the job that I've had for the longest time by a country mile. I've had this job way longer than any other job I'd had. But it's an odd job. And we all do it differently. We've all got different ways of doing it. Nick and I approach it differently from... Sheila and me approach it differently from each other. We all do it differently. But we all work quite hard. And you may not believe me. It took quite a while for my own wife to acknowledge that this was hard work. And she has a history in broadcast journalism, but the proper stuff, like, actual reporting from places and things, not just sitting here shooting the breeze. And part of the problem with this is that for those of us who aspire to being quite good at it, the more effortless it sounds, the better it gets. Right? Would you agree with that? I think even in non-speech radio, even in music radio, the more effortless it sounds, the better it gets. But, and I don't want you to laugh, it's very hard work. Why am I talking about this? I'll tell you. There has been some research shown that, if you like, brain work can be as exhausting as manual work. It's a fascinating bit of scientific research, and it talks about how overworking your brain can lead to it literally poisoning itself. Chemicals released into the prefrontal cortex force the body to slow down in order to give time for the production of the toxins needed for them to be flushed out. So it makes continuing to think difficult, but it also manifests as fatigue and tiredness, as the body and mind both need a break to excrete the toxins. So I don't know whether you've noticed this, but in the unlikely event of, in fact, I'm not sure that you would have ever witnessed this, but I'm sure it's happened. In the unlikely event of me losing an argument, the chances of it... I know, I said unlikely, but it's almost certainly going to happen in the final hour of the programme. And we don't really have that many arguments on the programme. We used to do it every day. But back in the day when we were arguing all the time about everything, if I ever came off second best, it would almost always be, I think it would be almost exclusively in the final hour of the show. And now I know why. I've always known why. It is a form of fatigue, but now I've got scientific evidence of how hard it can be. So continuing to think is rendered difficult, but you also get fatigue and tiredness in the body and the mind. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Matthias Persiglione of the Pitié-Salpêtrière University in Paris, France. Influential theories suggested that fatigue is a sort of illusion cooked up by the brain to make us stop whatever we are doing and turn to a more gratifying activity. But our findings show that cognitive work results in a true functional alteration, accumulation of noxious substances, so fatigue would indeed be a signal that makes us stop working, but for a different purpose, is to preserve the integrity of brain functioning. As George points out, Nadine Dorries, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Suella Braverman and Dominic Raab are as safe as houses then. You're absolutely right. Full of beans. Got more energy than the Duracell bunny, if this theory is correct. Or it's not even a theory, it's science, isn't it? So, 8 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm going to say something to you now, and you may not like it. I think this job is harder than manual labour. I genuinely think I don't know what I would compare it to. Probably flying an aeroplane without autopilot, or being an air traffic controller. I'm being a little bit. No, I do actually believe it. Actually, I'm not just doing this for fun or for provocations. I honestly think that this job is more exhausting. Because manual labour, you can do 8 hours a day. You could not do this for 8 hours a day. Even Steve Allen would struggle to do this for 8 hours a day. And if you want to hear effortless, tune in to Steve in the morning. I honestly think that I can prove that this job is more exhausting than manual labour, than your job is, if you're listening to me on a building site now, as long as no one's put a brick through the radio yet. The producer just texted me to say, have you ever done manual labour, James? To which the answer is yes. Shows how much attention you pay to the programme you produce. I spent 2 weeks on a building site in South Yorkshire in 1988. I think there's a blue plaque up on the outdoor toilet that I helped build. It wasn't an outdoor toilet, it was like an extension on it. I think that is an unassailable position. You could not do what I do for 8 hours a day, but you can do manual labour for 8 hours a day. And let's just say that we'd be equally tired at the end of the shift. Now, part of the problem is, of course, that this is now the third hour of the programme, which means that the toxins in my brain are bubbling away, and I'm quite tired, and I've forgotten the question that I was going to ask you as a consequence of this scientific research. If I'd done it in the first hour, you'd be chuckling away, the words would be fizzing out of my mouth, I'd be hitting all of my marks, phones would be ringing off the hook. I've kind of forgotten what the point of this was, except for the very simple comparison. So, how do we do this? I think we do it like this. Yeah, chess grandmasters. That's a brilliant example. God, I've got some great prisoners. Chess grandmasters need about 6,000 calories a day during tournaments because of this phenomenon. Lewis in Uxbridge is less convinced. I'm sorry, he says, I'm a bin man. I do 20 to 30,000 steps a day. Come and do a day on the dust cart. I bet you can't move at the end of the day. Yeah, right, Lewis, but I bet you couldn't do this. Don't literally come in, sit down, that's it, the light goes on. I haven't got like guests queuing up to talk to me or anything like that. You just come in, you sit down, that's it. So the question is, what is more exhausting? Manual labour or intellectual exertion? 0345 6060 973. Tim's window cleaning in 35 degrees in Worcester. He goes, I have you beat today. Next week you can win. Again, Tim, 8 hours doing this? I mean, I reckon I could clean windows for 3 hours. I'd be all right, even in 35 degrees. But 8 hours? No chance. So that's the point. 3 hours of doing this is absolutely knackered. You couldn't do more. If they made me do an extra hour, I'd start playing records. And obviously, the perfect caller to this programme is someone who's done both. Someone whose manual labour is a little bit more recent than 1988, which is when I graced the building sites of South Yorkshire, and whose, what would you call it, intellectual labour. So also, just to keep things friendly, have you got a job that people refuse to believe is exhausting? Because I have. Only relatively recently have my own family accepted that when I get home from work, even if it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I can actually be quite tired, especially during the coronavirus period when I found it very draining, as you know. I found it exhausting and difficult. But just on a normal day, the stress of finding things to talk about, the stress of making them interesting and getting the phones to ring and making you ring me with interesting things to say, I mean, that is proper graft. And the years of feeling embarrassed by my soft hands and my middle class, they're behind me now, thanks to this research. Never again will I feel that it is somehow more valid to be a horny-handed son of the soil than it is to be a gob on a stick. Being a gob on a stick is finally getting the sort of scientific respect that it deserves. So that is also, as Gary points out, that is why driving makes you tired, partly, because your brain is absolutely pooped. So how are we going to do this? Who's going to know? 0345 6060 973. I think driving would be exhausting to do it professionally. That's why you've got me on in the car or the cab all the time, to keep you awake, keep you engaged, keep the old, adrenaline pumping. That's why you get cross with me. I like flipping O'Brien. And then the next day you're like, he's lovely, and he's lovely. I see the way he spoke to that little old lady. So there we are. How do we know? And do you agree that intellectual exertion is more exhausting than physical exertion? And finally, how can we prove it? So have you got a job that your partner refuses to believe is exhausting? Because I often say, well, it's not exactly going down a mine, is it? But going down a mine, I don't know, piece of cake. Do the same thing every day. I've got to come up with at least 3 topics every morning. What do you have to do? You just have to sort of mine coal. 0345 6060 973. is the number that you need. A little bit more of the science before we throw open the phone lines. What you've got, you see, is higher levels of a chemical called glutamate in the brain's prefrontal cortex, which accumulates in the synapses between the neurons, interfering with how messages are passed through the brain. This is proof that glutamate makes further activation of this part of the brain costly, such that cognitive control is more difficult after a mentally tough day. So if I ever fall foul of Ofcom rules or accidentally swear or commit a mild libel, it will almost certainly be in the final hour of the programme when not only am I pooped or suffering from glutamate-based exhaustion, low-effort decisions, but Keith probably is as well. He works more hours than I do. Although the second part of his shift is on Eddie Mair's show, so it's more likely to happen on Eddie Mair's show than it is on mine. Let's get the phone lines open. Ideally, you will be able to extrapolate from the burblings of the last... I say burblings. I'm going to now call it graft. From the hard graft of the... It doesn't write itself, this stuff. From the hard graft of the last 30 minutes, you'll be able to extrapolate a question to which you can now respond. 03456060973. In fact, I might stop doing questions in the final hour of the programme and let you do some bloody work for once. I'll just talk a bit and then you ring in. We don't do questions. We don't do topics. We just do conversations. Because, I often say this is your show as much as mine, but I'm the one that does all the work. No one ever rings me at 1 minute to 10 and asks me a question that I can then spend 10 minutes answering, do they? I've got to come up with questions and answers. It's 12:16. 17 minutes after 12. Here it is. I mean, this is the last gasp of the middle classes. Mental exertion, intellectual exertion is more tiring than physical exertion. This job is more exhausting than manual labour. I'll take some text, then we'll talk to Daniel, who's in Mansfield. This is from Faye. Being a teacher, I completely agree about mental exhaustion. We have to hold attention and focus with 28-plus teenagers or little ones for more than 6 hours a day. Anyone who hasn't done it for a couple of years at least can't comment. Thanks for raising it. I like this one as well. My dad was a shipwright. It's unsigned, unfortunately. And he was never convinced that I was wiped out after a 6-hour life drawing session when I was at art college. Shame he's not with us anymore so that he can actually see this research and realise how wrong he was. This is from Gary in London. I worked in a warehouse doing 40 to 50 hours a week. Now I work as a mathematician and software developer. Without a shadow of a doubt, I am twice as tired now after a long day doing maths than I was in the warehouse. All I can do is mindlessly watch TV after. My boyfriend doesn't understand at all. He assumes that because I sit at a desk all day and only move away to make coffee, I should have tons of energy to do stuff after work. It's infuriating. You're telling me. You're performing on stage with a huge audience that picks up every syllable and you do it all without a script. That's me. Oh, you're talking about me. Yes, I do, actually. That's absolutely true. It's definitely harder than manual work. I'm a retired teacher who's also done factory work. Teaching was much harder. Bet you couldn't do what I do, says Sheila in Dagenham. I listen to you for 3 hours on the radio every day. You've got me there. That is flipping heck. Give the woman a medal. Will's in Sidmouth. Will, what would you like to say?
Oh, you've ruined my weekend, James.
Oh, again, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right, buddy. 30 years of brickie, 10 years in the office. My other half's a PhD. We used to argue about this all the time.
Go on.
And you've just proved me wrong. Thanks for that.
So you've always argued that the manual labour was harder work than the...
And even for the last few years, I've kind of... at best, I've said it's about the same.
Well, it depends what you do in the...
I'm going to have to report that I was wrong.
Well, good. It's very important. I could recommend a book to make it easier for you, but it depends
I've read the book, James.
Oh, marvellous.
It's vital reading when you're a married man, how to be wrong.
It depends what you do in the office. So if you're on a building site, 30 years of brickie, and you're putting in a full 8-hour shift every day, that is exhausting. If you're in the office and you're only really active when the phone rings, or you're only... do you see what I mean? Then that is not necessarily exhausting.
No, I'm contract managing now, so it's constantly looking at numbers, contractual terms, heads of terms. It makes me head spin most of the time.
Well, then why were you arguing that it wasn't making you tired then? I don't understand.
Oh, because I can't have a win in the argument, James.
Oh, I see. Oh, fair enough. Just for domestic travails. And a PhD is considerably harder than bricklaying. Just sue me if you don't like that. It's not even an opinion. It's counting. Well, take care. Your weekend will be fine. You'll probably go better than you thought because you'll have that warm glow of rectitude. And see, you can tell it's the final hour of the program. If you listen back, right, when I'm doing my monologue at 10 o'clock in the morning, I hardly ever lose a word. I reach for a word and there it is. Bang, gone, got it. What am I thinking? Remorse. Remorse is the word I was looking for then. I wanted a word that began with R. Rectitude and remorse. Righteousness would have worked. 10 o'clock? If this was, 21 after 12? If it was 21 after 10, I'd be hitting all those words. But I can't because I'm exhausted because of all the glutamate. No, it's not monosodium glutamate, Phil. And working in a Chinese takeaway would not be harder than doing this, honestly. Daniel's in Mansfield. Daniel, what do you reckon?
Oh, well, it's a bit of a swings and roundabouts because I've been on the coalface down the mines and I'm now a driver.
Right.
And I can honestly say most days, driving for when you're working 15 hours a day,
yes,
you're focusing on the road, you are mentally drained at the end of the day. But I'm saying that when you're working outside on days like today, even being a traffic warden, could actually be physically draining and
because of the heat. Because of the heat. Yeah, that does add a new dimension to it, actually.
I've got to take into it. But I have an argument with my girlfriend, my fiancée, all the time.
Go on.
You're only sitting there driving. You're not doing nothing.
Same here. She says all you do is talk. I said, well, it's not just talking. You've got to engage brain before engaging mouth, and you've got to engage brain before engaging everything, really, from the indicators right through to the accelerator.
And I think you could see it last night. Because, like I say, last night when I got home, the heat was hot all day. I was out at trucks a bit days, driving back. When I physically got home, I sat down on the bed, and that was it. I could not move, literally lift my legs up for half an hour. I've done hardly any walking, but I couldn't move my legs for half an hour.
That's incredible.
So my brain had worked up.
That is, well, it's your brain. Do you know why your brain is doing that? Wait.
I don't know, probably chemicals.
No, it is chemical. I'll tell you why it's doing it. It's because of the glutamate has made further activation of the cognitive parts of your brain more costly. So it essentially shuts you down in order to create the chemicals that get rid of the toxins that are making you so tired. I bet you didn't know that when you got up this morning, did you, Daniel?
No, but if that's the case, I think there should be better rest stops for truck drivers around the place then, so we don't actually get this chemical well,
I think that's an extremely powerful point, actually, and albeit that this topic is quite light-hearted, there is some very serious stuff underpinning it, as always. Before you go, how hard was it being a coal miner?
Well, it was a lot easier mining coal in Australia than it is in the UK.
Did you do it only in Australia?
No, I've worked up at Harworth Colliery and Welbeck Colliery up at the Midlands.
Gosh.
As well. But in this country, it is a lot harder because you're a lot further down, so you've got a lot more heat coming from the Earth's core into your environment.
Right, I hadn't thought of that. So coming from the heat. And briefly, if I were to... it's UDM country where you are now, isn't it? If I were to stand up in your local and announce that speaking on the radio for 3 hours every day is harder work than coal mining, what do you think would happen to me?
Well, my local's a local rugby club, so I think they'll put you in the middle of the scrum.
It's 23 minutes after 12. James is in Southampton. James, what would you like to say?
Yes, I'm a bit torn on this because I've done 12 years in retail.
Yeah, I've done a lot of retail.
Some of it in the supermarket, and then I worked on the train selling tea and coffee, pulling a bloody heavy.
Oh, that's physical. That is hard work. That's a lot easier because I worked in quite a posh shop for most of my retail career, and that was a piece of cake. Yeah,
and then I moved. Then after not because I got tired of that, because I've been trying to apply for a while. I got into air traffic control after that.
Oh yeah. Blimey, that's quite amazing. You moved from doing the trolley on a train to being in air traffic control.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic career change.
To be honest, the air traffic controllers, they come from all over the place, all walks of life.
Yeah.
Graduates, non-graduates, retail, services, hospitality. As long as you've got the right skills, you'll get in. Right?
So, yeah.
But, and I was just saying to your researcher on the phone that not so much when you start doing the training, yes, obviously you do the physical air traffic control into practice for when you get your licence, but you also have a uni degree's worth of information to learn, and you have to sit for hours, and so you're trying to do the job, with being instructed by a professional, and then sort of go home afterwards and then learn all your theory.
That's absolutely
learn all the rules of the air traffic control, and it's. But I'd say I was knackered after a 12-hour shift on the train.
Yeah,
but I was also worn out after 8 hours of training, followed by 4 hours of learning theory for air traffic control. So I'm struggling to
6 of one, half done as the other.
Really.
Okay, let me help you out. Is there a limit? I mean, you wouldn't do 8 hours of air traffic control uninterrupted, would you?
So, no, you would not. No, so that is the next point of my thought process with your researcher. I was like,
go on.
So an air traffic controller would do no more than an hour and a half, absolutely, literally 2 hours, very, very top.
There you go.
And they have to have a half an hour break after that.
Couldn't do this job then, you see. There's 3 hours I do. Why do you think Andrew Marr only does one? It's exhausting, this job, I'm telling you now.
Well, and he's come out of a job where he used to have to sit on TV on a Sunday morning.
That's true, once a week.
and have to speak to people who might not be telling him.
Well, that can be particularly exhausting, and he does it so well. 26 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you, James. Chris is in Exeter. Chris, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm a business owner.
Right.
Small business providing a service for the building industry. And I wear lots of hats. So some of the time I'm on the building site.
Like the village people.
Yeah, a bit like that. Some of the time I'm on the building site, and some of the time I'm in the office.
Oh, fascinating. Go on then. You could be the holy grail for this topic, Chris.
Well, the last 2 days, a perfect example. Yesterday, I was in the office.
Yeah.
And it was running at me 100 mile an hour.
Yeah.
Staff, customers, quotes, invoices, all sorts of stuff to do in the office.
Yeah.
I didn't get a moment's break. I didn't take a lunch break.
Yep.
I hardly had a chance to go to the loo. I was exhausted at the end of the day.
Yep.
Today, I'm on a building site, which is why I've got the time to call your radio station.
Yeah, I hope no one's listening on the building site, because I don't know how well this is going to go down with the troops, Chris. I don't know.
I might not get off. Maybe in a box.
Exactly that.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, when you're on the building site, you do take the occasional break to pop to the toilet, have a drink, chat with the chap that's passing by on the building site.
Yep.
So you do get a little bit of downtime. So I would say, ultimately, I was more exhausted yesterday than I'm likely to be today. Sometimes my day on the building site is physical, it's tiring, and it's demanding. Other days not so. But ultimately, I would say the office work was more demanding on me, and I was more exhausted. However, one caveat to that, James.
Please.
There's a big difference between me running my office yesterday and you talking a load of rubbish on the radio most of the time.
How dare you? Have you any idea? Keith, this is outrageous. Keith just made a mistake there because he's so tired. His finger slipped on the button. It may sound like rubbish, Chris, but the amount of mental energy I put into making it digestible and comprehensible is immense and epic, you see.
James, I am in sympathy with your wife. We're in complete agreement.
I think everybody is.
So please,
Thank you, Chris. Have a good day.
That's it.
And I hope your colleagues on the building site give you exactly what you deserve. I bet he saved it at the end with that foul slur upon my professionalism. It's coming up to 12:29. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dan in Sandbach says, hang on a minute, you get a news and a commercial break every quarter of an hour. No. They're not breaks. That's where I have to crack the whip a bit. That's when I have to make sure Keith is still awake. I have to find out whether I've got my guest booked to talk about Donald Trump in the final segment of the programme or whatever it may be. I'm never off duty from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. This is like flying a space shuttle single-handedly. And I don't think Chris appreciated that or indeed demonstrated the correct amount of respect for the difficulties of doing this job. The number you need if you want to join in is 0345 6060973. Dan makes another good point from Chester. I think it will be interesting to see how exhausted people who work from home doing these jobs are compared to those in manual labour, and then send the results to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg, famously photographed having a snooze in the actual House of Commons, but has an enormous problem with people working from home or working parents using flexi time to make sure that they can handle childcare. It's almost as if he hasn't got the first idea what he's talking about. On the plus side, the absolute absence of any form of mental exertion means he's probably got bags of energy left when he gets home at the end of the day. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. It is 12:33. Kelly's in Walsall. She says, or he says actually, Kelly's one of those names, isn't it? Surely Jacob Rees-Mogg is absolutely cream crackered at the end of his working day with all that racking his brain trying to think of Brexit benefits. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, I don't think he tries that hard, to be honest with you. I think deep down, he knows it would be a waste of whatever intellectual energy he has left. James, I actually can, says Alex in Chelmsford, appreciate how tiring a job like yours must be. I'm an entertainer, you and me both, mate, in care homes. Feels like that sometimes, Alex. And only do 1 hour at a time. But for that hour, or 3 in your case, you have to be 100% on your A game and energised no matter how you really feel. That's a lot of mental pressure. It can be very tiring, although it may look easy to others. Alex, I feel seen. Thank you. Keith, are you paying attention? Phoebe's in Bedford. Phoebe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I'd just like to say I'm not going to pretend to ever have any experience with manual labour. But a few years ago, or just when I left school, actually, I did work in retail.
Yes.
That was sort of 10-hour days on your feet all day.
Yes.
And now, since then, I've worked as a conveyancer. Right through Rishi Sunak's stamp duty relief, which absolutely destroyed our industry and our profession. And I have to say, after working, even if I just don't do any overtime and just do a standard day, finding the energy to then go and do something else after I finish that work is just, it's a real struggle. It's, I haven't done anything physical. I've been sat at my desk all day. But
it's a different sort of tiredness, isn't it? It's a different, entirely different flavour of tiredness, and it's actually more exhausting.
It's more exhausting. Like sometimes I just feel like I can't move for at least an hour or so after I finish a day's work.
Do you know what that is, Phoebe? That's science, that is.
Yeah, well, I like to know that because I just felt a bit lazy before.
No, it's glutamates, mate. It's glutamates, mate. It's all about the glutamate, mate.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to tell everyone I know.
Pupil dilation. Have you looked at reduced pupil dilation? You might be suffering from as well.
No, but I'll take notice of it now, I think.
No, I will too. So they did. Thank you, Phoebe. The volunteers were given tasks interspersed with choice trials where they were asked to pick between cash rewards, either small values given instantly, or larger values they would have to wait for. Those subjected to difficult tasks were more likely to choose the low-effort rewards that required less waiting time to receive. It changes the whole body chemistry, brain chemistry. This is amazing from Stephen Rayleigh. That's where the otters come from. He says, I spent my early working life doing manual work, and I would come home every day physically exhausted but exercised, and this is the crucial bit, but also mentally able to unwind and read a book or watch TV. I now work in a high-pressure cyber security role, which is fully home-based, but now in the evenings I'm too mentally exhausted to take in any new information or read anything longer than a tweet. Physically, I'm too hyper to relax or sleep. There are different types of exhaustion, and I expect there are roles that are challenging for both physical and mental exhaustion. See, everyone keeps wanting me to write another book, you see, and I'm finding it almost impossible. I don't know whether I'm putting in more effort at work now on the radio, or whether I'm just getting old, or whether the fact that the first book kind of wrote itself, because so much of it was transcripts from the radio show, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to write. And the second book was during lockdown, so I didn't have the 2 hours of commuting, and I could justify. I don't know, but Moyles is the same. Chris Moyles has written some brilliant stuff. His memoir is a masterpiece, and he's keen to write more. But your brain won't go there. And now you know why. It's all got all the glutamate in it. Yeah, mate. Ed's in Huddersfield. Ed, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah. So, firstly, thank you for letting me on the show.
You're very welcome. You made me worried now. What are you going to do?
Oh, no, I was basically up to say I completely agree with you that intellectually, like, it's been an intellectual job is more, or at least in my experience, more exhausting. So, like, I used to do office fitting, which was carrying 200 plus desks upstairs and fitting them. Crikey. I currently, as a part-time job along my studies, I do home shopping delivery.
Oh, yeah.
Alongside studying mathematics at university.
Right. Okay.
And my degree is more focused on the mathematical modelling.
Right, that's hard maths, isn't it?
Yeah, that is really hard maths. I spend most of my time studies banging my head against a whiteboard.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
Being like, why?
That's philosophy. That's philosophy, not maths. Go on.
And I read through books, I'm like, oh, that's why. And then turn the page, I'm like, I do not understand this again.
Whoa.
And I was just like doing the physical side of the job, doing like driving now on the road, like especially in the weather.
Yes.
Like being in a van all day, the heat as well kills with the windscreen and stuff. But
no,
I completely agree. It's like I completely agree with you. Like I finished my job on a night, and I'm a little bit tired, like physically a bit tired, whatever, depending on whether it's been a hard shift or not. But it's nowhere near as comparable as just doing 2 hours of like in-depth study, or like doing my dissertation or something like that. yeah, like
it's a different sort of time. And I think the best way to convey it is that how much energy you've got to do other stuff when you get home, like reading or watching. Even watching a film can be tired. I mean, being able to concentrate. There it is. That tiredness. When you've been at the whiteboard all day, you can't concentrate when you get home. But when you've been delivering all day, you can. That's what I would say.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, like I could do doing shifts with my job. I could do that for 8 hours straight and be tired at the end of it, obviously. But the thought of trying to put myself through the equivalent amount of time doing my studies and stuff like that, like I get about 2 hours into it, and I've got to leave it probably for about equal amount of time just because my brain's all that completely.
No, I get it. I get it. And I mean, it is actually probably going to grow, this story, as more and more people appreciate, as we're doing during these conversations, the seriousness of what they've discovered, as opposed to the relatively light-hearted treatment that I elected to give it at the top of the hour, because it makes more and more sense the more you think about it. And those points about concentration are absolutely key. Thank you, mate. Good luck with your studies. If you ever need any help, whatever you do, don't ask me. Lee is in Reading. He says, I'm a plumbing and heating engineer, and my job is both physically and mentally demanding. That absolutely right. So that I wouldn't say that was manual labour. I don't know what you describe that as, when you've got to be an expert and also you've got to do the heavy lifting, both metaphorically and literally. I'm fitter than all my friends who work in offices. One friend is being seriously overworked by a hedge fund in the city, and it's having an incredibly toxic effect on his body. So there are definitely different types of exhaustion, or different types of people and how they respond to exhaustion. But on this one, so there are definitely two types of exhaustion. I think you are absolutely right. And you'll be having both of them, albeit hopefully you get the best of both worlds by having more left in both tanks, in the physical tank and the mental tank. Jennifer is in, I've not heard of that before. Is it Quarriers Village in Renfrewshire?
It is.
Thank you. What would you like to say?
Different types of tiredness.
Yes.
My job only involves half an hour slots of being in front of the public at a time, because I conduct funeral ceremonies and wedding ceremonies. But the emotional and psychological prep for that is such that it is quite demanding.
Absolutely.
And then you've got half an hour in front of people. So you have to be emotionally engaged with everyone for that whole amount of time. And people say, can you do 2 or 3 funerals a day? And I really couldn't do that. I could maybe do 2, but I'd be shy. But my hobby is I'm a scout leader, and I can do that, then go into a field for 8 hours and run about and build fires and build cooking shelters. But it's a completely different type of tiredness.
Yeah.
And
the responsibility for the scouts that you have would be more like the day job, wouldn't it? The worrying about them and making sure everything's okay. But why are you laughing? Do you not worry about them much? Just let them get on with it.
Yeah, I do. Oh, yeah, I worry about them. Yeah.
but the actual tent building or ditch digging, that is not going to exhaust you in the same way that the day job does. The writing and conduct, because you've got things on your shoulders, haven't you? There, which invisible things.
It's a massive, massive responsibility, and that responsibility does. It does weigh you down. It's a privilege to do it, but it's a massive weight. So it's emotionally exhausting, which is a completely different
emotionally exhausting.
Yes,
exactly that. Emotional exhaustion as a different one. I remember when I used to do quite a lot of acting, and at the middle of technical rehearsals, when you'd sometimes be in the theatre for a whole weekend doing it, I'd burst into tears, which obviously is quite commonplace in thespian circles, but it was through a different sort of exhaustion, not the same exhaustion you'd have after, running around a raced running track for hours or doing physical labour, but a different sort of exhaustion. Here's a nice text. Thank you, Jennifer. From David. He says, I missed the start of this hour on LBC, so I have no idea what has prompted this discussion about tiredness, and I don't really understand what's being said. Can anyone help? No. Sarah is in Barnet. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, your usual self.
Yes. Is that good or bad? Let's not go there. What made you pick up the phone?
It's good, I promise.
Thank you.
What made me pick up the phone? So, yes, very interesting topic. So I'm an assessor for the police, which when I'm assessing people who want to be police officers or detectives is pretty frenetic, to say the least. And you've got to write verbatim notes. Believe it or not, they're still writing. We're still writing it all out by hand as they speak.
Wow. Wow.
And my other job is I'm a gardener.
Okay.
I'm 60, and I have never been fitter in terms of doing the outside job, but I am absolutely exhausted after a day of listening, writing, and assessing. It's like, and I'd never really thought about it till you had said it.
It's because the brain is an organ. It's an organ, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is it's a bit like, when your heart rate goes up, you get more tired. So when your brain is buzzing away, then you are going to be more tired. And you hadn't clocked it until you heard this conversation today.
Not really, but what I don't understand is if I missed the beginning as well of your hour.
What were you doing?
If you're pumping,
bloody gardening,
I couldn't possibly share that with you.
No, all right.
But both, you're pumping adrenaline for both. So why does that not help?
It's a glutamate, mate.
It's a glutamate, mate.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens is you've got more glutamate in your prefrontal cortex, which accumulates in the synapses between the neurons and interferes with how messages are passed throughout the brain. You see.
You see, you listened to what they said. That's pretty impressive.
It is, isn't it? That's exactly what is going on here. Chemicals released into the prefrontal cortex force the body to slow down in order to give you time for the production of these toxins to stop. So it's not adrenaline that's the problem. You're producing toxins when you're thinking hard, and your body needs time to stop producing them. So you've got to stop thinking hard for a while, and that's why your body tells you, it induces a feeling of tiredness so that you'll sit down, put your feet out. And we spoke to a lorry driver earlier who can't lift his legs for half an hour when he gets home because the body is saying, sit still, sit still, sit still. Because lorry drive, the brain power of driving a big lorry on roads is going to be immense. Not as hard as presenting a radio show, obviously, or interviewing potential police officers. But, we've all got our crosses to bear. So have a lovely weekend in the garden. Don't forget to put cream on or wear a hat, stay in the shade. It's not just her, that's everybody. Speaking as someone with a peculiarly Irish complexion, I am particularly attuned to the dangers of sun exposure. It's 12:46. 12:48 is the time. If you want a giggle, and a slightly cheeky giggle, I think we've clipped this up, have we? Yes, we've clipped up the introduction to this where I was claiming that it's much harder to do my job than it is to do manual labour. So what you'll get in the replies to that is people who haven't been listening to the programme. In fact, you'll probably get people who haven't even bothered to watch the clip. They'll just be responding to the headline. And if you want to laugh at the raging of ignoramuses, then go and have a look at that now. In fact, I'll retweet it from my personal account at Mr. James OB so that you can find it easily. And just have a giggle. I suppose partly at my expense. I really do need a haircut, though. That is absolutely certain. 12:48 is the time. Back to the simple question of what's more exhausting, mental exertion or physical? Adam's in Lichfield. Adam, what do you reckon?
Hi there, James. Pleasure to speak to you. I've been working from home since 2006, and it took me until about a month ago to work out how hard it is and that I've been doing my job wrong. I was just pounding the phones really hard and was finding it really mentally exhausting.
Yes.
But I didn't have the appreciation of what you were on about, so I kind of felt like I was making it up.
Yeah.
It took me until I had, not a very bad call, but a bit of a bad call. Went down the road to take my mind off it afterwards, and as I was coming back home, I looked down and I was literally shuffling like an old man.
Oh, mate.
And I just didn't realise the physical effect it had on me. It was kind of a little bit of a mini breakdown. I had a chat with my boss.
Yeah.
He was kind of furious.
Why?
Because I've been working too hard, pushing myself and making myself ill.
Wow. And that was all mental then? Because is it sales that you do?
Yeah, it's professional tele-stalking.
You see, I think the stresses of sales are something actually that would merit a whole hour of the programme themselves, especially if it's commission-based, because then you've got almost every aspect of your existence is contingent upon the
I don't
push.
work for commission.
Oh, well, okay.
When I actually got my job originally, I didn't want to work for commission because I thought it meant that I'd only be looking for results to give me money rather than results for the company.
Yeah.
Like the naive idiot I am.
Well, no, you've been very hard on yourself, Adam. I don't think you need to be. So, have you found a happier balance now then, since this happened?
Yeah, he basically, my boss pointed out that if I got one appointment every week, it would have been the best year I'd ever had for my company.
Right.
So it was almost like, well, if you get one, just stop Which I still can't believe it. It's a bit mental. If I get one appointment on a Monday, I'm not meant to do anything else for the rest of the week.
Well, he's exaggerating a bit, isn't he? But what he's saying is that don't treat every day. I can believe it did. I really can. You just chill.
It's made such an impact. It really has made such an impact on my life. I couldn't. I got to a point where I thought I was going to have to quit, and I realised that all the pressure I was putting on was me putting it on myself. And
you are leaning into leaning into the relaxed element of it, which actually makes you better at your job. What a lovely conclusion. I'll probably be the last word. I'm not sure it will, actually. We may have time for more. Adam, take care. Always good to have me on in the background if you're trying to take your mind off the stresses and strains of your job. I doubt they had me on in the White House much, which is where my next guest used to ply his trade as a veteran of the George Bush Senior Department of Justice, or not the White House then, and also a regular contributor to The Guardian. I speak of Lloyd Green, who joins me on the line now. To help me, Lloyd, if you would, understand the latest developments and indeed your successes in the Department of Justice's interventions in this curious FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's home in Florida. I've seen the word nuclear has now appeared in some of the coverage.
Yes, it has. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Last night in U.S. time, the Washington Post broke a story saying that the FBI was looking for documents that pertain to nuclear, and then there was a follow-up story at the New York Times. So the word nuclear is very much part of today's discussion.
So some of the paperwork that they were looking for may have concerned nuclear weapons.
Right. It would appear that way. I mean, what's going to happen is the government asked a trial judge, a magistrate to be exact,
yes,
to release a copy of the search warrant and the inventory of documents or items that were taken. Then late last night, Donald Trump said that he was fine with that. And by 3 o'clock today, there's a deadline for the government to report back to the court. And moving from there, by tonight, we may actually see a copy of the search warrant and the inventory.
Gosh.
Now, what's actually in the text of the search warrant or in the text of the inventory, we don't know. At least the public doesn't know. And so we'll all find out together.
Do you think, I mean, it would be hard to imagine, given that Trump has been protesting his innocence in characteristically colourful fashion since it happened. Do you think that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, was calling his bluff?
I think Merrick Garland definitely called his bluff. I mean, what was going on for a few days starts Monday night. Donald Trump goes ahead and says, hey, they raided my property. The government had not said anything prior to it. And then it became, what was the government actually looking for? Trump's lawyers began to indicate that they had not received a copy of the search warrant. Then yesterday afternoon, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, says, yeah, you actually did. And now this phase of it is coming to a head. And so possibly as even as soon as tonight,
wow,
we may have at least the general lines as to what was being sought. Now, there's another document, and that's called the affidavit. The affidavit is the document that lays out the basis for the search warrant. That is not going to be disclosed today. That document is not part of the government's motion for disclosure.
Where does this sit in the sort of in the great scheme of things? If you look back over your own time in the Department of Justice and all the administrations since, and I suppose even going back as far as Nixon, where does this current saga sit on the sort of scale of surprising events, Lloyd?
This rate's high. You've had presidents out of office who were the subject of deposition. Ronald Reagan had to give his testimony even once he was outside of office. Where this gets wild is you're dealing with a raid on a ex-president's residence. You're dealing with the issue of nukes. It's the type of stuff that if someone were writing a spy novel, it would be that far-fetched you'd be scratching your head.
There was a report I don't know if you remember it, because I think it was around 2019 when some experts were expressing about Saudi Arabia's desperation to get hold of nuclear technology. And there was one report expressing concern that Donald Trump didn't seem to be particularly worried about it. But that's probably moving into castles in the sky territory, I think, at this point.
I mean, at the moment, definitely yes. Yeah. I mean, it is now on people's horizons. People are talking about it. But so far as the documents that Trump may have held, and we don't know that he did or does, as they pertain to nukes.
Indeed.
It's the topic of the search, but there's no indication yet that any of those kinds of documents have been retrieved.
So watch this. It's all going to come out later today, quite possibly. We shall watch with bated
a chunk
breath.
of it will.
Yeah, wow.
And it's also important to remember as to where does this lead?
Go on.
There's one possible stream, one possible path that this goes along and says this becomes the predicate for a possible indictment against Donald Trump under various record-keeping or even possibly an espionage statute. There is another stream that this can take, which is no indictment, but this is a matter of retrieving something. Politically, though, that is far more fraught for the incumbent administration if there's no indictment, because then you've had all this drama, all this television, and it sort of then becomes more like an elephant giving birth to a mouse.
And not for the first time either, because there'd be previous examples of where perhaps people were expecting fireworks only for damp squibs to emerge.
Yep, very much so.
So anyway, we shall watch once again with interest, but with that caveat in our minds, Lloyd Green, that it may be another example of Donald Trump being investigated and the fruits of that investigation not turning out to be the smoking guns that so many either predict or expect, or possibly even in many cases want. Lloyd Green, former DOJ operative under the original George Bush presidency. Many thanks for your time today. I think that's taken us right up to the wire, actually. I'm just glancing at the clock, and I'm going to hand over to Sheila on time today for the first time, because I'm so tired. Did you see this story about... Why are you laughing?
I did see this story, and I heard your claim that our job is harder than manual labour.
And the rest. Harder than coal mining.
I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah? I said a naughty word in the office.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
What, like, damn yes?
Yes. No.
Hell yes.
Yes, no, yes.
What?
No, I disagree, James. It won't surprise you to know.
Right, when's the last time you were down a mine?
I was in a swimming pool at 6:30 this morning, for goodness sake.
Well, anyway, everyone
else...
It was
nice. It was hard yards, but it was nice.
Everyone else agrees with me, I think. So I'll take that. As a retired teacher, the last word on this one to Chris, I agree that jobs requiring mental effort are very stressful. However, I once fielded an hour-long live phone-in on LBC, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, that's one stone. That's a busman's. Oh, that's not flipping out. You should try doing 3 hours every day like Sheila's about to.
Yeah.
Go on.
Good and ready. I've limbered up. I'll be all right. 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 I'll be all right.
Bầu trời chiều không màu nắng ấm, thầm thầm buồn vọng nhớ về đâu. Phương trời xa ai nào hay biết.